Most of you by now have already heard that Israel has started going into Gaza. And some of you may be asking, well, why are they not just going full bore, right? They're not going in there and just destroying them. You got to understand the United Nations voted for a ceasefire, and Israel pretty much ignored it. But Israel smart enough not to go in full bore because then they would lose the backing of NATO, right? They wouldn't be getting help from them because there would be several thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of civilian casualties in Gaza, and United Nations is trying to avoid that. Well, if Israel went in just full bore, guns ablazing, that would happen, right? They'd just be blowing up everything over there. And if they did that, they would lose the backing of the United Nations. So I always say you got to remember your history. In Vietnam, we fought a war with one hand tied behind our back, right? That war went on for several years. Hey, guys, you're also hearing from a lot of the prepper channels that, this is it, 72 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours, this and that, things are just going to start popping off everywhere. Eventually, something is going to happen in the United States. Nobody has insider information. If they did have insider information, how come they didn't warn us about all this stuff before it happened, right? The larger channels that are now getting insider information on the Israel-Gaza situation, they weren't talking about it before then, was they? Then all of a sudden their insider information popped up after the attacks, after the October 7th attacks on Israel, right? Then they started getting all this insider information. Guys, eventually it's going to affect us here in the United States. I'm hearing that they've stopped exporting firearms now from the United States. But one thing you got to look, ammo. I've always said they'll never be able to take your guns, but they can make it dang near impossible to get your ammo, right? Because they can either price it so high you can't afford it or limit the availability of it. They'll put ammo manufacturers on just manufacturing for the military, and then that just leaves a little bit on the civilian market, right? And then prices skyrocket. You have people taking advantage of it. Comes down to simple greed, but of course they scream supply and demand. We can raise our price because there's small supply and there's a high demand, when it actually just comes down to greed. If it wasn't greed, the prices would have dropped by now, since the pandemic, but they haven't. So yes, go out and get ammo this weekend, because eventually it's going to get more expensive and harder to find. It's just the truth of it, and that's going to affect us here. Hunting season, you got to understand that hunting seasons are, a lot of places it's already open as far as rifle season. You need to understand that a lot of the common deer cartridges are going to be sold out at this time because there's still a supply issue on it. In our area here, 410 ammo is just, you don't see it on the shelf. It hasn't been on the shelf since 2019. So you're not going to see 410 ammo. Oddballs like 16 gauges, you're not going to find it very available very much. It was sparsely available before the pandemic. Your AR ammo, 308, 556, 223, things like that, they're going to start getting not much on the shelf, right? And the people selling them is going to raise the price. So this is what preparedness is for. Really, by now, if you've been prepping through this whole last 3 years, if you started in 2020, you should be good on ammo. And of course, it's always best to add to it. I'm not saying don't add to it, but you should have enough put back for what you need right now, right? It's going to get bad. When is it going to get bad? I can't sit here and tell you. This is all the master plan of this new world order. People forget stuff that was the president said or people said before. They forget it, and then when it happens, they're like, hey, I remember something being said about that. Like the draft. Made a video the other day on the draft. The Selective Service issued a tweet, I want to say it was a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, about the draft, and people got all upset, and then it just fizzled out, like a lot of things do here on YouTube, right? You'll hear all kind of stuff for a week or two, and then you don't hear nothing else about it. Guys, what would wind up more than likely happen, Iran's done said if Israel goes into Gaza, that would pretty much start a war, right? Is it just big talk? Is it boasting to saying what they're going to do and they're not going to do it? I can't tell you that. But I do know that according to what we're hearing, Our troops are being fired upon in the Middle East. We're firing back at countries that's firing on our troops. Eventually, this is going to go big, right? And I don't mean big as in nuclear war. Everybody's going to start launching their nukes, right? But the Middle East is where you would see a nuclear weapon used. I've been saying that since this stuff started over. Them people over there do not care. They don't care. They don't look at wars the way we do. You got to understand that. They look at wars totally different. Totally different. They're religious wars. They're fighting over, this was our land before you. This is our land. You understand what I'm saying. You don't need me to sit here and tell you about it. What could happen here in the United States? Well, you could have terrorist attack. You could have a false flag designed to look like a terrorist attack to drum up support for all this, right? Because I've said before, patriotism honestly is gone in the United States as a mass majority of patriotism, right? Because you have people saying the government's doing this, government's doing that, but they need the country to come back together. Just like before 9/11, just like Pearl Harbor, you got to think Great Depression. Guys, this stuff happens for a reason. It's allowed to happen for a reason. People are like, well, what's the matter if it's patriotism, right? Because if we have an attack on the U.S. soil, believe it or not, that will up the military enlistments. People will actually run and join the military. I firmly believe we should protect our own soil first, right? That doesn't mean me, my kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews should be over in Israel fighting. Another thing I want to make a point about, if you have social media, you see a lot of people with the I stand with Israel support, right? Just like the Ukraine flag on their profile pictures and stuff like that. Will they still support these countries if their kids or their grandkids, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters has to go fight in that country to protect Israel or Ukraine? No, it won't. You'll see the flags come off their profile pictures. You'll see the I stand with Israel come down. They'll be like, we don't need to be over there. Guys, we're living in crazy times. There's too much stuff. I've told you there's too much stuff going on for eventually something not to break off all over the world, right? This could be the stepping stone that gets us into the huge world war. I firmly believe we're already in World War III. It's just not the type of war we're used to seeing or we've read about and things like that. It may not be full blown. Every country's physically fighting each other, but we are at war. We're proxy warring with Russia. We're back in Israel, but yet we're telling Israel. Another point I want to make. We're telling Israel, don't go in there and just completely destroy Gaza, right? Don't do it. What? Why are we telling them how to handle their business? Number one, right? Yes, civilians should not be injured in wartime. But it's going to happen. It's happened in every war, right? This thing's going to get out of hand over there, and it's going to get out of hand quick once this thing gets going. You got all these Middle Eastern countries that are just going to just start fighting each other because that's what they do. It's to the point now where you need to be prepped up. You need to be aware of your situation. You definitely need to keep your head on the swivel, which we've told you that from the start of this channel. You've got to be aware of the situation that's going on over there, because Iran is saying if this keeps going, we're going to start seeing attacks in America, right? You're not going to get a pre-warning. You're not going to get insider information, because the people in the know that know this stuff is not going to risk their security clearance or going to jail for telling a YouTuber. That's something you need to understand. They are not. Now, yes, they may have somebody that's retired that used to do that job and they should know something, right? But since they retired to now, the SOP's changed, right? Things have changed. Let me know your thoughts on this. This one here, I kind of ramble along in it, but you understand what I'm saying. We have prepper channels telling you you're going to die in 36 hours, 72 hours. Prepper channels telling you a nuclear bomb's going to go off every day. Just be prepared to the best of your ability. Keep your head on the swivel. Be aware of your surroundings. Protect yourself and your family at all times. At that moment, you're the only person that can do it. Stay safe. Keep prepping and comment on this video. And honestly, let's just wait and see what happens, because nowadays we have to react. We don't have the ability to know before something happens. Guys, stay safe.